the radical, fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, welcome everybody. Welcome to the Yaron Brook Show on this fine Saturday afternoon. We're back to politics. Lots of political news. We're going to be talking about Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who passed away yesterday. We're going to talk about a little bit about her, but more importantly, I think, or more relevant, not more importantly, more relevant, is the whole political fight about replacing her, which is going to be the headlines for the next, really through the election, unless the Republicans cave, which I doubt. It's going to dominate the news and dominate much of the coverage around the election. So this is going to be a big issue. And then we will talk a little bit about TikTok. As of tomorrow, you will now be able to download the TikTok app or the WeChat app from the app stores. Basically, Donald Trump, our commander-in-chief, central planner-in-chief has dictated that you cannot now download TikTok and WeChat as of Sunday. You can still use the apps. You can't download them. You can't get updates for them. So I quickly downloaded the TikTok app yesterday. I've had WeChat for years. I have TikTok just in case. You never know. So I have it on. I was not on C-SPAN this morning. Best laid plans, something about that. Basically, I got a call last night saying, Ruth Bader Ginsburg trumps you. And you're not an expert on this, so we're going to dump you, and we're going to devote the entire show to Ruth Bader Ginsburg and what happens. They promised to have me on again, but, I've heard that before. So I'm not counting on it. I hope to be back on. But for now, no C-SPAN. That's what happens when you get breaking news. You learn that in the news interview business. I was all ready to wake up at 4 a.m. this morning to do the C-SPAN interview. So, but, so be it. So be it. Hopefully they'll invite me back, and we'll be able to do that show at some other time. Is just quick sound check. Everything okay in terms of sound? On YouTube, Facebook, just give it a thumbs up if the sound is okay, or if it's too soft or something. Then I think it's fine. All good. Excellent. All right, so let's talk a little bit about Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and of course, as usual, super chat. Feel free to ask questions. Questions on the topic will get priority. Questions of $20 or above will get priority, and yes, on topic and above $20, those are the questions we'll get priority. So feel free, and of course, those of you who like to support the show in significant ways on Super Chat, you're welcome. Thank you. Thanks for doing that. All right. Don't forget to like the show. We've got 100 people watching live right now, so please like it. You can wait until you actually like it before you like it. I like the fact that even before the show started, I had 20 thumbs up and 1 thumbs down. Some people don't have to listen to me to know they dislike what I'm going to have to say, so they give you a thumbs down right off the bat. So, all right, so let's jump into this. Ruth Bader Ginsburg. I mean, I'm not going to give her bio and stuff. I think you can read that elsewhere. It's all over the news. It's all over everywhere. I mean, obviously, an incredibly accomplished woman, an incredibly successful woman, a woman who was path-breaking in terms of the acceptance of women into the legal profession. At the beginning of her career, the second female Supreme Court justice, somebody who clerks of hers have written about how supportive she was and how helpful she was in the careers of those clerks. When she was in the Supreme Court, she was a good friend of Anthony Scalia. So obviously, an incredibly sharp mind. I don't think you make the Supreme Court without a sharp mind, and I don't think Anthony Scalia becomes your friend without a sharp mind. A woman who obviously I disagreed with on many things, and disagreed with her opinions as a Supreme Court judge on many things. But you have to admire somebody who had some principles, and who fought for those principles and stood by them. And on issues like abortion, she represented my voice on the Supreme Court. So I very much supported her opinions on abortion, and I think she held in the balance an important, she held the pro-abortion position. She was strongly supportive of that position, was a voice for that position on the Supreme Court. And we'll talk about that because I think that one of the consequences of Trump appointing her replacement will be, I think, the death of Roe versus Wade, the death of abortion protection at the federal level, and then it's going to be interesting. Then it's going to be interesting where that takes us. She was a strong character. Over the last few years, she's been incredibly sick, in and out of hospital, in and out of emergency rooms, cancer treatments. She basically did everything she could to hang on and not die while Trump was president. I mean, I don't think there's any question about that being the case. It's going to be, so really smart, really bright, really important for the advancement of women in the legal profession. A real fighter. I mean, you can disagree with somebody and still view them as a real foe, and I think, and I respect them as a real opponent, and I think that's what Justice Scalia's attitude towards this. I think Scalia's son has written a tribute to her. You can find that on his tweets, on his Twitter account. So I think she garnered real respect from her opponents, and that's to her credit. I think flags flying at half-mast, across Washington, D.C. makes a lot of sense today in her honor. So, a significant woman who's achieved significant things in her life, and we as objectivists, I think, who recognize accomplishment and shouldn't view everything through the prism of politics, I think should be in a position to recognize that and to appreciate that. So, my respects to RBG, which is the term that people use to refer to him. All right. So now the political question. The political question is, should Trump nominate her replacement? And Trump has indicated he will. The Senate Republicans, at least Mitch McConnell, has indicated that he will bring a Trump nominee to a vote. It's not clear Republicans have enough votes. There are a number of Republicans that have expressed their opinion that they should not be bringing a candidate to a vote right now, less than 2 months before an election. And of course, there's a precedent. The precedent for this was under Obama when Scalia died, and it's interesting that Scalia created the fury around 2016. It is his friend RBG who's creating the fury right now. When Scalia died, about 11 months before the election, and Republicans held the Senate, Republicans refused to bring a nominee forward. It is the president who presents the nominee. It is the Senate that must confirm the nominee. And Republicans refused to even consider, even bring to debate, never mind vote, on Obama's nominee. So Obama nominated a kind of a leftist, but a centrist leftist, because he had a Republican Senate to contend with. A rabid leftist could have never probably not passed that Senate. And Republicans were in a position to at least vote and maybe vote his candidate down. They did not want to vote the candidate down because there's a tradition in the Senate that you vote for candidates that you believe are qualified. And the person that the judge that Obama had nominated was certainly qualified. So what they decided to do was say, look, we want to wait until after the election. And the reasoning there was, look, the Senate is Republican. The people have voted for a Republican Senate twice, in 16 and in 18. in 12, what was it, 12 and in 14. And we have a majority Senate, and therefore we have divided governments, and we should let the people resolve who they want as their next Supreme Court judge by letting let the vote go through in the presidential election. Now, I think that was a disingenuous argument. I think they should have voted, and if they didn't want this guy, they should have voted him down. But to delay a nomination for 11 months because of a pending election was a precedent. It was, and it was just Merrick Garland was the name of the candidate. It was wrong. It was disingenuous. The reasoning was made up. They just didn't want to be in this quandary of voting him down, and they didn't want to confirm it. So they fudged the rules in a sense and didn't even consider him. And you have to remember that then the Republicans did one more thing, which is going to be crucial if the Democrats win the Senate at some point down the road. Certainly if they win the Senate soon. If they win the Senate in this election and Biden becomes president, Republicans will pay for this. But during the Trump administration, Trump, if you remember, has been calling for, throughout his presidency, the elimination of the filibuster. The idea that you need 60 votes to vote on an amendment, so you really need 60 supporters to get any bill passed. Trump has been against that. Republicans have held their ground on the filibuster. They've kept the filibuster, but then they eliminated the filibuster for judicial nominees, at least for Supreme Court nominees. I'm not sure if it goes all the way down to other kinds of judges. So the Gorsuch and Kavanaugh, I don't think Gorsuch got 60. I know Kavanaugh didn't get 60. Gorsuch and Kavanaugh were the first Supreme Court justices, at least in modern times, to have been elected to the Supreme Court without 60 votes. So twice, Republicans have changed the precedents, have changed the kind of the traditions. Yeah, Gorsuch got 55 votes. I think Kavanaugh got 51, I think 51, 48 to 51, something like that. Maybe it was 52 to 48. They've changed the historical precedents, right? In order to get their way, not taking a vote on Merrick Garland and doing away with the filibuster for the purposes of nominating a judge that they wanted and passing a judge that they wanted. Remember, right? Yeah, I mean, the first time that this idea of 60 votes was removed, right? It was removed under Reed. It was yes, and yeah. It's so this idea of eliminating it. Okay, so it was 50 to 48 by Kavanaugh, and 2 abstained. The idea of eliminating the filibuster basically makes us more of a democracy. The idea of fudging the rules in the Senate to get your way makes us more of a democracy and less of a constitutional republic. The whole idea of what the founders created here is a system of government that makes it difficult to pass legislation, difficult to make fast changes. And the Senate, recognizing the dangers of a simple majority, introduced the filibuster. Originally, you had a literally filibuster, and then they exchanged that. Literally filibuster means literally speak, right? Then they replaced that with the 60 votes, and now they've done away with it with judges, and Democrats are already threatening to do away with the filibuster completely if they win the Senate in this election, and if Biden gets elected as president. So again, whatever you vote for president, I do think you should vote Republican in the Senate, if only to prevent the Democrats from doing away with the filibuster, which I think would be a disaster. Of course, again, Trump has been advocating for doing away with the filibuster for a long, long time. Yeah, the filibuster was never supposed to be what it became. because it was supposed to be somebody could stand up and speak and hold up a vote by speaking. But I like the fact that they need 60 votes because I think it prevents bad laws from getting through. And we have a lot of bad laws. Almost all bad laws are bad. Almost all laws are bad. So, I'm a big believer in gridlock. So, Republicans basically violate tradition in 2016 by not bringing Garland to a vote, changed the filibuster rules, and now, less than 2 months before a vote for the presidency, are going to cram through a judicial nominee of their choosing. If the Democrats win both the presidency and the Senate, they're going to be in a very bad mood. They're going to want payback. And there are two things that they are likely to do. Not likely, but at least are threatening to do. We'll see if that turns out to be likely. One is that they are likely to do away with the filibuster completely so they can get a Green New Deal, they can get socialized medicine, Medicare for all, whatever, public choice, whatever they want. They'll cram through the Senate, and there'll be no stopping them because if the Republicans lose everything, they would lose everything. And second is, Benjamin says Democrats can eat it 6-3 and it's done. No, it's not done. The fact is that the Democrats can change the number of Supreme Court justices. What Democrats can do, and what has been threatened in the past, and what they're threatening right now, if you follow the news, you'll see Democrats actually making this threat, is that they can expand the Supreme Court to 11 justices, nominate 2 of their own, and at least bring it back to 6-5. That's what they can do. FDR threatened to do that. And as a consequence of threatening to do that, the Supreme Court, it basically caved. But there's nothing wrong. There's nothing, he didn't try to. He threatened it. It was a realistic threat. And as a consequence, he got to what he wanted. Because they didn't force his hand into doing it. But there's nothing to stop Democrats from expanding the court to 11 and nominating 2 of their judges. Again, they feel cornered, just like Republicans have felt cornered when Democrats do the BS. And given the tribalism and given the antagonism, the hatred, the division, the where they are today, it would be a disaster to see this kind of gamesmanship at the Supreme Court level of expanding the court when you get bad nominees you don't like. But I wouldn't be surprised if they did it. So first is there's a real potential for really bad political outcomes as we move forward that this has created. And, I don't think it's avoidable. I don't think there's anything that can be done. I mean, we'll see whether there's enough Republican senators to support a nominee, just less than 2 months before an election, a presidential election. I'm not sure. Right now, there are at least 3 to 4 Republican senators who are wavering. They can afford to lose 3, so it's a 50-50 tie, and then Pence steps in and votes. But even that would mean a Supreme Court gets a judge where it's even worse than the Kavanaugh, 50-48, where it's 50-50 or 51-50, where the vice president had a vote in. And that'll set up an even more contentious future. That'll set up an even more tribalistic and even more, Republicans, Democrats at each other's throats future. So, we will see. The other issue is, of course, who is Trump going to nominate? Who is Trump going to nominate for the court? Right now, we have a conservative majority in the court, but it's not that conservative. And you've got Roberts and even Gorsuch who have voted in an unexpected ways. It's a court that's unlikely to reverse Roe versus Wade. It might weaken Roe versus Wade, but it's unlikely to reverse it, and showed no inclination to reverse it. But the fact is that, and to me, abortion is a big deal. It's a big deal. And it was to Ayn Rand. I mean, Ayn Rand basically viewed this as one of the most important political issues that we face. One of the most important litmus tests, if you will, for candidates. I mean, one of the reasons she didn't vote for Reagan was because of his opposition to abortion and his elevation of the issue to such a high ranking. Well, it appears that the number one candidate that Trump has, now we'll see who he ultimately nominates, but it looks like he's going to try to replace Ruth Bader Ginsburg with a woman, and the number one candidate for that is Amy Coney Barrett. Amy Coney Barrett is the U.S. Court. She's a judge on the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Seventh Circuit, based in Chicago. She was confirmed to that court in 2017. She was a Trump nominee. She's been vetted. She's gone through the Senate. They know what they're going to go after. So she's kind of an easy nomination. She was being on the short list. She was on the short list with Kavanaugh. And she is a devout Catholic. And she has 7 kids. As a reflection of that devout, of her being a devout Catholic. And she would overturn Roe versus Wade in a blink of an eye. She would do it in an instant. She claims that she does not allow her religious belief to interfere in her legal decision making, and I'd like to believe her. But I don't really. There's nothing to suggest that she wouldn't. Other suggestions, other people that have been mentioned. Allison Rushing, who is a U.S. Court of Appeals in the Fourth Court, based in Virginia. She's young. She's 38. Very anti-gay, very religious right, very, very anti-abortion. Other nominees, it's less clear. The only man on the list on what has come out as a short list by a variety of different news sources is a judge by the name of Amul Thapar, who is of Indian heritage. He is 51. He is also Catholic. I don't know how religious he is. He converted to Catholicism when he got married. And he is a U.S. Court of Appeals for the 6th District, based in Cincinnati, and a favorite of Mitch McConnell's. So, I don't know, somebody, I think Ryan says that he's pretty convinced that Roe versus Wade will not be appealed, will not be reversed no matter what. I disagree. I think it's going to go pretty quickly. Certainly if they get a 6 vote, if the Republicans, if they put on one of these judges who is committed to an anti-abortion position, I think that abortion gets voted against pretty quickly. I don't think Roe versus Wade was particularly well decided. I think it's left a lot of holes, just legally. I think the idea, the right to an abortion, is something that the left has a really hard time defending, given that it doesn't really defend rights in any other arena. I think that conservatives present themselves as having the moral high ground, and I think Roe versus Wade gets overturned. If they get 6-3, Roe versus Wade is out. And again, Ayn Rand at least considered the abolition of abortion, at least at the federal level, to be a horrific possibility and an anti-freedom, anti-rights bellwether, right? And so something to keep in mind is that gay marriage might be at risk, although I doubt they'd actually vote that off. I think there are enough conservatives on the court right now who would vote for gay marriage right now that they wouldn't reverse that. And it's a recent enough ruling that I don't think it will reverse. But I think abortion is at real risk of being overturned. I think that again. I think that is horrific. I think it's a horrific. It would be horrific, and it would be another sign of the decline of America, another sign of the anti-individual rights mentality of America. And again, I don't want to get into a whole discussion of abortion here, but I'll just lay out my position. This is an individual right. It is a question of individual rights. It's a direct question of individual rights, and I just don't believe you have an individual rights until you're individuated, until you're born, until you are a separate human being. Life might begin at conception, but human life doesn't begin at conception. You're not human until, at best sometime in the third trimester, and you're not an individual human being until you are born. So in my view, there's a zero even basis for discussing to ban abortion in the first trimester. There's some conversation you could have about the third trimester. I don't think it's legitimate, but you could have some conversation about the third trimester. Zero about the first trimester. And that's that. But I believe that you get rights at conception. You have rights at conception. Rights are not innate. Rights are not intrinsic. They're not part of the sperm that fertilizes the egg and are created once the egg is fertilized. That is a bizarre and mystical interpretation of what rights actually are. Right? That can be a right if it's intrinsic in you. So, the unborn have no rights because they're not individual. Only rights that exist are rights of individuals, and since they're not individual, since they're part of the mother, they have no rights. And in the first trimester, you're not unborn. You're a clump of cells. So again, you could make some arguments about the third trimester in terms of consciousness and the mind and the brain and stuff like that. I still don't think they're right, but certainly there are no arguments to be made about the first trimester. So I think abortion is a huge issue. I think generally issues around gay marriage and other things that relate to homosexuality become an issue if conservatives get a majority of 6. And it's not clear to me that conservatives are pro-individual rights when it comes to economic areas. In economic areas, often that's when you see the conservatives voting with the left. To claim that a woman has a choice about sexual intercourse is, as Ayn Rand said, that is a position that is anti-life. That is a position that is anti-life. It's anti-pleasure and anti-life. To place that kind of a burden on a woman. To place that kind of a burden on anybody. Sex is a healthy part of a healthy life. I've said many times that you should indulge and take advantage of the immense pleasure that sex provides, women or men. And if I think it's responsible to use contraception, but life is not a burden. Life is that's BS. That is a defeatist, horrible, anti-life mentality. Life is to be enjoyed. Life is to, relish. Life is to have pleasure in and with. And you're going to impose your anti-life, pro-suffering, pro-burden philosophy on me and on women? Why? I don't buy that. You don't get to impose your negative views of human life on me. You want to have a perspective, life is a burden? Fine. You want to have a perspective, don't have sex? Don't. Fine. Do it. You can have it. Don't use the law to impose those views on me. That's why I reject conservatives. That's why I reject this whole view. No, you should have sex. You should embrace sex. And if contraception didn't work and you get pregnant and you don't want to have a kid, you shouldn't have a kid. And the idea that you're not burdened with this kid because life is a burden, life is hard, suck it up, is just evil. That's an evil perspective. It's an anti-life perspective. And it and Rand in particular really denounced that perspective of life and why she would be against people like Jordan Peterson and so on. Yeah, life has consequences. And some of those consequences are pleasure. And some of those consequences, you make a mistake, you fix it. And getting pregnant when you don't want to get pregnant and having an abortion is fixing it. And that's great to have those kind of options. And it's wonderful that we have the technology that makes it possible to have that without, without the kind of awful kind of abortions that women had to suffer through when they were younger. Before the technology for abortions happened. And it's wonderful that we have contraceptions and wonderful that we have the pill so that we can, the consequence of pleasure is pleasure. And if there's a consequence of pleasure, and sometimes the consequence is an abortion. Yeah, pulling a gun is not like pleasure. This is why you are anti-life, because you associate pleasure. You can come up with an example following pleasure, following sex with pulling shooting a gun. Very, very, very different. All right. Anyway, I don't want to get bogged down on abortion. I think I've said everything I want to say and have to say about it. Oh wait, don't forget you can ask questions using the super chat feature. So far the questions have not been. I'm just checking. Not being related to, well, here's one. If checks on the executive branch fail, is there a legal recourse for individual states? Can they sue the federal government for abuse of power? Will there be a legal challenge against the order to suspend rents? I mean, there is a legal challenge to suspend rents, but think about how long legal challenges go through the system. It'll take a long time, but it's not clear to me that you will win that legal challenge. Again, the checks on the executive branch, one of the checks is the courts, and if the court system is corrupted by the same aspects that our executive branch and our Senate and House are corrupted by, then it doesn't help. And there is a legal challenge. The Pacific Legal Foundation has filed a court challenge against the suspension of rent. I think in one particular city, maybe it was Seattle, and Pacific Legal Foundation, the Institute for Justice, are two of the organizations, the Goldwater Institute, three of the organizations that do a phenomenal job in taking individual rights and suing at the state and then federal level and trying to take cases to the Supreme Court to get decisions about these fundamental rights-related issues. But it's hard, takes many years, and they lose. A lot of cases they lose. So the checks and balances are failing us. They're failing us because there's a lack of understanding of what the Constitution means, even, maybe even is the wrong word, primarily among our Supreme Court judges. People just don't understand, including the conservatives. They have no concept. They have no clue about what it means. All right, so this will be a monumentous, really significant few weeks. Again, I think a 6-3 conservative majority on the Supreme Court will have profound consequences for a variety of different issues as we move forward. I think the Republican kind of sticking their finger into the eye of the Democrats over the last 5-6 years is going to have significant. And I'm not saying they started it, because Democrats did it with Obamacare. They passed Obamacare in a kind of sneaky, weird way, and Democrats have done it before. But this escalation, this ongoing, continuous escalation between the Democrats and Republicans, which constantly is eroding the nature of our system of government, is constantly eroding the very foundation of the idea of separation of powers and the difficulty in passing any particular agenda item. The fact that they are eroding all of that is going to have far-reaching consequences, no matter who started it. But the fact is that that it will be that the Republicans are the one escalating it, and I wouldn't be surprised if Democrats, if they win the Senate, escalate it even further. So we're really on a train speeding downhill towards an abyss, and I just don't see what stops it. I mean, my view is that the best thing to stop it is divided government. Is divided government, but I'm not sure we'll get divided government. I think if Trump wins, the Republicans will win the Senate. If I think Trump loses, the Republicans will lose the Senate, and everything will continue and continue to escalate out of control. I think the only way we can stop this is to have kind of divided government. But based on based on the chat, that's not going to happen. All right. All right. I should avoid the chat right now because the discussions about abortion are pretty pathetic. Abortion is not murder always, as long as it's not in the process of being born. It's not murder. To murder, something has to be an individuated human being, and it's not. But you could argue again about the third trimester, or parts of the third trimester, or the last part of the third trimester. But you can't argue about things like the first trimester. It can't be murder. It's not even remotely human in the first trimester. Okay, next topic is TikTok. Let's talk a little bit about TikTok. This is a topic I've covered before, but as you know, President Trump has banned downloading, not banned the app, but banned downloads of the app starting tomorrow on the Apple Store, on whatever stores they're on. You can't download the app, the TikTok app, starting tomorrow. I downloaded mine yesterday just so I have it, just in case I ever need it. I actually started a TikTok channel, so if you're interested in watching some Yaron Brook videos on TikTok, they are there. Just look up my name on TikTok. So the ban of TikTok and WeChat, by the way, WeChat is probably much more significant than the WeChat. The WeChat ban is much more significant than TikTok. It's a much more significant piece of software. Before we go on to that, those of you who like the show, please go like it. We've got almost 200 people watching, almost 100 likes. That should be well over 100. Hopefully it would be 105, 150. I know the abortion topic and the Trump topic and the TikTok topic are not topics that you guys are likely to vote up, but and this ban really, reminded me of a show I did or a segment I did, maybe it was a few years ago, maybe it was a few months ago, I can't tell anymore. And that is, are we all China now? Are we just, is the China model won? And I think the answer is yes. I think the Chinese model has won. I think, the United States of America now has embraced China. And it's left and right. Maybe it's different portions of the left and different portions of the right, but it's basically left and right. And both have embraced the Chinese model. What's the Chinese model right now? Authoritarianism when it comes to politics. Authoritarianism when it comes to your personal life, monitoring you as a human being constantly. And, generally economic freedom, but the state has the ability to step in at any given point in time and take that freedom away and regulate it and control it and supervise it and funnel it in its direction and do all of that kind of stuff. So on the one hand, a mixed economy, but a mixed economy tilted towards more freedom because you need the wealth in order to confiscate it in order to use it. And on a kind of an authoritarian regime that dictates our lives and runs our lives and tells us what we should produce and what we should produce at least. And to a large extent, you see that. I mean, look at COVID as a good example of this. So what's the Chinese model for dealing with COVID? You shut everything down. You lock people up in their homes. You close the town down. You don't let anybody move. In the United States, if you look at all the kind of CDC manuals, all the game planning, all the plans that our epidemiologists at our government level had before this pandemic, lockdowns, mass lockdowns on scale, were never part of those plans. The CDC, the government, the infectious disease community, nobody had a plan that included lockdowns because their reasoning was, the American people, this is America, we can't lock people down. That's insane. You can't lock people down. That's a violation of their rights. Americans would never go for it. It's political suicide. We're not going to do it. And what happens as soon as we get COVID? We look at the Chinese and we say, oh, well, it looks like it worked in China, so we're going to do it. So we basically got massive lockdowns in the United States of America, in spite of the fact that this is not part of anybody's game plan. Not just a lockdown of Manhattan because there's or New York City because there's a problem with hospitals. No, we have to lock down the entire state of New York. And by the way, we have to lock down much of the country, even though there are not that many cases in the country and there's no problem with hospitals. No, we're going to embrace the Chinese model. We're going to violate rights on a large scale in order to solve a problem. And then, right, you get an economic crisis in the United States. Now, how did the Chinese deal with it? Well, through massive violation of rights. There's an economic problem. We shut down these businesses. We promote those businesses. We move money from these to those. We redistribute. We move everything about. Yeah, the curve was flattened a long, long time ago. Lockdowns stopped being about flattening the curve in late March. So what do we get in the United States? Well, we've got this problem of, people who can't afford to pay their rent. So we're going to not allow landlords to evict people who don't pay their rent. And we're going to do it on a scale. We're going to do it across the country for everybody for 4 months. And we're not talking about a Democrat this time doing it. This is a Republican. China doesn't like Facebook, Google, and Twitter. They don't like Facebook, Google, and Twitter. They don't like YouTube. So what do? If you don't like those things, you ban them. You don't allow your citizens to download them. So in the United States now, we don't like TikTok and WeChat, and we're on the verge of not liking Google, Facebook, and YouTube. We might not ban them, but looks like we're going to break them up and bring them into court and really create real hassle for them. You cannot get Facebook, Google, YouTube, Twitter in China. And now the United States doesn't like TikTok and WeChat, so we ban them. We don't go through, notice that with TikTok, there's no due process. There's no, let's take them to court. There's no, let's show the evidence, let's produce evidence and actually go through a process by which we show they're a national security threat and we ban them. No. We just ban them. How's that different than China? What was our response to the financial crisis? Massive printing of money. What's our response to COVID? Massive printing of money, running huge deficits. That's what China does. That's how China runs its economy. What's our response to Twitter, Facebook, YouTube in terms of their ability to manage their platform in terms of ideas? It's to tell them what ideas they can and cannot have. It's to tell them what ideas they can and cannot produce, just like China does. To hell with private property. To hell with your ability to decide what ideas are presented on your platform. No. We're going to decide what ideas are in the national interest and not. if you follow the National Conservative movement, you know that the National Conservatives are big on industrial policy. Well, where did they get that from? If you follow mainstream senators, they want industrial policy. Well, that's China. That's China and their so-called capitalism. They leave some freedom, but they manage it, which is fascism. On every issue, you know, China is winning. So China has tariffs, and it controls what businesses can and cannot do business in China. So what is our response to that? Our response to that is tariffs. Our response to that is to, not for them to copy us, but for us to copy them. And the response is, we're going to limit what businesses can do business in America, just like they limit what businesses can be done in America. China never announced they're nationalizing all private businesses. That's bullshit, Brandon. Jesus. I mean, put aside the stupidity, but the fake news that these people produce is quite something. No, what brought out all the nuts on my on Twitter today is politics. It's Ruth Bader Ginsburg. You're supposed to rally around the president, rally around the most extreme conservative nominee, supposedly if you're an Ayn Rand fan. And they know I won't, so they come on here to troll me. And then, of course, TikTok, which you have to hate TikTok, right? Because Trump told you to hate TikTok. So what choice do you have? You must hate TikTok, right? It's the tribe. So anytime I put on a topic which is going to challenge the tribe comes out. The tribe comes out. Right? So topic by topic, we in the West are taking on like the exact same political model that the Chinese have. All in the name, by the way, of preserving our freedom, preserving our uniqueness as American, preserving the American way. Right? We're banning America, destroying individual rights. CKJ asked, individual rights protected by precluded infection. There's a way to deal with infection. The government has a role in infection. The role cannot be to shut everything down. The role cannot be to isolate the healthy. The role government has to be to identify the sick and to isolate the sick. So the role of government in a contagious infection is to test and isolate, to test, trace, and isolate. But it cannot be to isolate or to prohibit you from making informed decisions about your life as an individual. So lockdowns, I think, are clearly unconstitutional. They're a violation of individual rights unless you can show that there's an imminent emergency that's short-term and will pass. And it's clearly defined by a timeline. It's clearly going to have, so we have to lock down for a week because the hospital's overloaded. And even then, only because the government controls the healthcare system. In a free market where the government didn't control the healthcare system, even that is questionable, the whole idea of hospital overload. I mean, that's what markets are for, is to deal with hospital overload, right? What do you call it? All right. Gene writes, what you do is of great value to me. Keep it up and ignore the trolls. Thank you. I mean, part of it is, part of the reasons I don't ignore the trolls, I know some of you are frustrated by the fact that the trolls are here and I don't ignore them. Part of it is that I'm hoping that among the people who support the trolls, there's still some people who think for themselves, people who are not completely tribal and not completely brainwashed. And so I want to at least, and I want to make it very, very clear. And one of my goals since Trump was elected is to make very, very clear that there is no relationship between Donald Trump and Ayn Rand. Donald Trump is nothing like an Ayn Rand hero. Indeed, he's an Ayn Rand villain. And so when the trolls come on and present themselves as objectivists, it is, I feel it like it's not a moral duty, but a moral necessity to let the world know, no, objectivists do not, these people are not, many of them are not objectivists. And again, I'm not saying if you support Trump, you're not an objectivist. I'm saying that these people, the people who verbatim mimic everything he says and support him no matter what on every decision, on everything, are not objectivists. All right. But since you brought it up, we're going to... Yeah. I think the trolls have taken over my system, so I can't block them. I'm trying to. All right, so for a while at least, one of them is blocked. Anyway, where were you? So I think we should be very, very afraid. I mean, the politics of what we talked before about the real danger of what's going on, the real horror of kind of the partisanship, the tribalism, the hatred, the gamesmanship, the one-upsmanship of Democrats versus Republicans. Right now, Republicans have the seeming upper hand, but what happens when the Democrats get it? I think that should be very, very scary because that leads us down a very, very dark alley, into a real abyss. And I think the same is true of this China thing. I think China needs to be dealt with. I've articulated my views on what we should deal with China. In a sense, it's much tougher than what Trump has done and is doing, but in a completely different dimension, in a completely different way. And I think we have to be really cautious about the Chinese impact on us. I think Trump has a certain adoration for authoritarians, and he is quite open to learning from the Chinese and how they do things. I think that's true of Democrats. The Democrats are fascinated by the Chinese model of having centralized control and, quote, pseudo-free markets, right? And I think the rest of the world is fascinated by this. I think if you look at countries like Russia is clearly trying to emulate that model. If you look at countries like Turkey, if you look at countries in Africa, if you look across the world, many, many countries are now trying to integrate this idea of having an authoritarian political system with a relatively free economic system. And that is really, really, really dangerous that model will become prevalent. And it's not sustainable, by the way. China will not stay economically even marginally free if its political system does not loosen up. So at the end of the day, it's going to come to a head one way or the other. It's going to come to a head one way or the other. Either the political system gets freed up or the economic system goes completely the way of authoritarianism. Wes writes with a $20 super chat, rest in peace, Terry Goodkind. I wouldn't be an objectivist today if not for his work. I mean, it's truly astounding how many people have come to objectivism because of Terry Goodkind. Hundreds, if not thousands, if not tens of thousands. I don't have a number, but I meet them all the time. I think a lot of the people who follow my show came to Terry Goodkind. I have to say, I really, really enjoyed getting to know Terry and spending time with him and spending some good quality time with him. Even going in his race car and him driving like a maniac along a race car track. He drove so fast that it made me sick, so I had to actually have him stop. One of the more embarrassing episodes of my life. But Terry was just a good guy and somebody that had an impact on many of your lives and inspired many of you and was a good friend, and we will all miss him. I exchanged emails yesterday with his wife and sent my condolences. I hope if they have a funeral and memorial service soon, I can get there. I would really love to participate. So yeah, it was when I heard it was really quite shocking. So I talked about that yesterday, but Wes brought it up again today. Thanks for bringing it up again because yeah, Terry was a good guy. All right, let's see. We got at least somebody who came to Objectives by me. That's good. That's great. I know a number of people who have come to Objectives by me, so that's also nice to know. Okay, let's jump into the Super Chat questions, and we'll go from there. So I think this is maybe the same person. There's a question of, is our culture today more Kant or Plato? Are Republicans influenced at all by Plato and Kant? Are Democrats at all influenced by Aristotle? I think that's a false way of looking at the world. And not a false way of looking at the world, looking at the way philosophy impacts us all. I think to some extent we're all in the culture. The culture to a large extent is still influenced by Aristotle. Not directly, but through the Enlightenment. I mean, we still have significant Enlightenment values in our lives. The fact that we still, respect science as a culture, that we still are excited about new technology, that we still are excited when a new iPhone comes out or when a brand new revolutionary technology comes out. That is the Enlightenment in us. That is the spirit of Aristotle still in us. And that is true whether you're a Democrat or Republican. I mean, again, it's the whole way of looking at the world. If Democrats are like this and Republicans are like this, both Democrats and Republicans are influenced by Aristotle and Plato in various aspects of their life. It's not like Republicans are Aristotelian. Republicans are Kantian and Platonic. That dominates them. And so are the Democrats in their politics. There's no Aristotle in the politics of Republicans. Aristotle in the sense of the fundamental ideas. And you can't view it simplistically like that. Most individuals are mixed. They might admire science and love technology and apply reason in some aspects of their lives, and in that sense they're Aristotelian, and go to church and whip themselves and think that pleasure was bad, or that you had to live with the consequence of sex, and that's Plato, that's Kant, that's Christianity, that's religion, and they hold both, and they're compartmentalized. And I'd say most people are compartmentalized like that. They have bits of the good, otherwise they couldn't live, they couldn't survive, they couldn't. And the United States as a nation has a lot of good, otherwise it couldn't grow, we couldn't have innovation, we couldn't have economic progress, we couldn't be successful, we couldn't, for example, the expansion of individual rights to let's say to gays is a good thing, and it's I mean, in a sense it's Aristotelian, in the sense that it is the idea of reason, of applying reason to the rule of law, and how you apply the rule of law, and to whom you apply the rule of law. So cultures are a mixture of a lot of different things, and it's not that it's not that it's Aristotle's influence, it's Aristotle through 100 other thinkers that have brought it here, and many of those thinkers, and to most people it's just in the spirit of the world. So Aristotle impacts our culture, and so does Kant and Plato. Now, in a sense, Kant is a modernization of Plato. Now, that's just me saying this, and I'm not an expert, and you'd have to really delve into that. We'd have to talk to one of our philosophers. Well, of course, Aristotle was anti-gay, but that's not the point. That's such a concrete bound mentality to think in those terms. It's the application of the principle of logic, the principle of reason, which is what's Aristotelian. It's not the specifics. Aristotle was pro-slavery, so what do we blame? We blame Aristotle for slavery. I mean, it's superficial, and it's what the left does today so well. We're talking about the principles that Aristotle laid down that have an impact on us today, and the primary principles there a respect for reason and for the individual mind, for individual morality, for egoism in some sense. It's not about accurate in philosophy. It's about Jesus Christ. It's about I'm talking about the influence. I'm not talking about what Aristotle held. I'm talking about the influence of Aristotle. And the influence of Aristotle is not about the specific issues. The influence of Aristotle is about his core philosophical ideas and the influence they have. Somebody says Goodkind was an objectivist when he wrote Wizard's First Rule. He was not. He had read Anthem, but he only read Atlas Shrugged, which really turned him into an objectivist, if you will, when he wrote the fifth book in the series, and I can't remember which one that was. So the fifth book is, and of course the sixth book is when you really get the influence of Terry Goodkind. Thank you, Christian. Thank you. Really, really appreciate that. Thank you to all of you who support me, and particularly those of you who support me significantly. What were we talking about? Plato and Aristotle, Plato and Kant. So the ways in which Kant is hugely influential across the board on Republicans and Democrats, on American culture broadly. But there's also significant influences of Plato, and I'd say that Plato's influences are very much through religion, through Christianity. Remember, Christianity, well, don't remember, I don't know if you know this, but Christianity is very Neoplatonic. It's very influenced by the early philosophers of Christianity, the early theologians of Christianity. Augustine, for example, were Neoplatonists, and Plato was a huge influence in the whole construction of the Catholic Church in particular. And the church is in that sense, is a projector, a continued projector of Plato into Western culture. And Kant's is even more significant. But again, Kant's philosophy is dead maybe qua philosophy, qua studying it as a philosophy. But Kant's influence is everywhere. It's not clear to me you would have postmodernism without Kant. It's not clear to me you would have any of the modern directions philosophy has taken without Kant. Kant makes modern philosophy, so everything that is modern philosophy today is Kantian. And no, the Catholic Church is not Aristotelian. I mean, again, it's such a superficial reading of history. The Catholic Church is Platonic, and it's a Platonist interpretation of what Aristotle would be. It's a divorcing of reason from reality. It's in many respects what they do to Aristotle is to undermine what he really is about by taking his methodology out of context. So the fundamental of the church is Plato, and then Aquinas brings Aristotle in, and then in order to fit Aristotle into their Platonic view of the world, they have to distort and finagle, and that's a huge injustice. It's a huge injustice because then when the early scientists and the early pre-Enlightenment thinkers, but the first people to break away from the church and start thinking for themselves, they're stuck in this paradigm that is the church is Aristotle, and therefore we're not Aristotelian, but they are exactly Aristotelian. Somebody like Leonardo da Vinci is the epitome of Aristotelian, yet he rejects Aristotle explicitly because he associated with the church. But he's wrong on that, just as modern interpretation of philosophy is wrong about that. It uses this weird Aristotelian methodology, but it's not Aristotle. It's the negation of Aristotle. All right, so how do I, let's see. All right, so that is Plato, Kant, Aristotle, and the direct influence of ideas on a culture. I highly, highly recommend. If you have not read this book, you really should. You really, really, really should. And that's The Ominous Parallels by Leonard Peikoff, where you will get the sense in which, the way in which Aristotelian influence and culture, way that happens. The way Plato and Kant influenced modern culture. Read Ominous Parallels, and then if you read that, the next book up about that is the dim hypothesis, where it's Aristotle's view of integration, not even Aristotle broadly, but his view of integration around reason and logic, which is influencing the culture. And it's Kant's false view, or Kant's rejection of integration, in a sense, which is at the heart of the D. And then M is this Platonic view of integration around a false concept. So, both Ominous Parallels and the dim hypothesis, Leonard Peikoff's two masterpieces out of three masterpieces, you should read that if these are topics that influence you. If you're interested in the impact of ideas, philosophy, on culture, on history, then Leonard Peikoff is the person. I can touch on these things. I can sprinkle some little bit of stuff on there. Right? But you really have to read Leonard Peikoff in order to really, really understand him. Yeah. All right. Yeah, Kant said Aristotle was the last word in logic. Yeah, and then he spends his entire philosophy undermining Aristotelian philosophy, and he spends the same thing about him talking favorably about individual rights, and then basically undermining the whole concept of individual rights in his whole philosophy, or talking about the potential of individuals to be happy, and then spending the whole philosophy really undermining the whole idea of happiness and individualism to a large extent. So the third work of Leonard Peikoff is OPA, Objectivism of the Philosophy of Ayn Rand, where if you want to understand objectivism, there is no alternative to reading Objectivism of the Philosophy of Ayn Rand. It is the one way. Why is Ominous Parallels not on Audible? I don't know. It should be. I'll look into that. I don't know why it's not on Audible. It certainly should be. There was a reprinting of Ominous Parallels where it just covered the Nazis. So it just covered the rise of the Nazis without the parallel to the U.S., and that might be on Audible. So you might want to just check Audible for all Leonard Peikoff and see if that maybe shows up. Because just that is worth reading. Just that is worth reading. Marius writes, my libertarian friends like Trump and always justify his actions. Any advice on how to explain the danger of a Trump election? They seem to think as long as the right is in power, everything will be fine. I don't think they're libertarian if that's the case, because the right is not libertarian. The right is the modern right is anti-liberty. The modern right is anti-liberty, just like the left is anti-liberty. And, I have spoken, I don't want to, I guess I don't want to repeat myself here because I've spoken at length in so many shows that I've done, and you can scan back why I think Trump is so dangerous, why I think Trump was dangerous when he was first elected, and I was against his election back then, and why he's dangerous today, and why he's turned out to be as bad as he is. So I refer you to my previous shows. And what your libertarian friends need generally, I agree with Stephen, is Ayn Rand. That's what everybody needs, is more Ayn Rand. How do beavers know how to build dams without the faculty of reason? Well, they know, they don't know how to build dams. They, in a sense of knowledge, of holding conceptual knowledge. They're programmed to build dams, just the same as birds are programmed to build nests. And they're programmed by evolution. So how exactly that worked out, how exactly it evolved, and what the circumstances that made that happen, I don't know. You'd have to ask a biologist, an evolutionary biologist. But beavers don't think about building dams. Beavers don't consider various designs of dams and choose a particular design over other designs. They don't change their architecture over time. They do it because it has worked and has helped their survival, and somehow it got encoded in their genes, and it got encoded in their genes because it was necessary for their survival. It wasn't an option. Exactly how that happened, you'd have to go and read up on some evolutionary biology. I'm sure some evolutionary biologists have studied beavers and probably has a little book about beavers and just explains that. So it's just it's not something I know, but it's evolution. It's natural selection, and it's survival of the fittest, and there's still things about evolution we don't know. We don't fully know. Right? There's still how fast, in what context. There's still a lot that we don't really know. You say, quote, if someone criticizes you and they're wrong, why should you care? Well, it pisses me off that smart people who should know better are being dishonest and nihilistic. Yes, in that sense. But it shouldn't challenge your self-esteem. It shouldn't make you defensive. So many people, if they're criticized, they set up barriers and become defensive, and they become angry, and they become, yeah, I get angry at smart people who are dishonest and nihilistic. I get angry at liars. I get angry at all these things. So the emotional, but I don't get defensive. I try not to get defensive. I mean, I'm not sure I'm perfect at this, but I try not to get defensive. And it's so you have to be able to separate the kind of emotion that it brings out in you. Not to get angry at the nihilism of people. Not to get angry about other aspects of it, about nihilism or about the dishonesty of people, would be a sign that you don't really value your values. Anger is justified. Anger is justified. It just needs to be the right kind of anger. It's not anger at the criticism. It's anger at their stupidity or their dishonesty or their nihilism. To the extent Democrats and Republicans make sense at all, they're influenced by Aristotle. I think that's right. To the extent that they respect logic, they respect science, they respect... But Republicans are not Aristotelian. I mean, they're motivated by Christianity to a large extent, and that's clearly Plato. Nick says, what do you think about doing a show on Terry Goodkind? Maybe. I mean, I'll think about that. I don't do shows on literature, on novels, because it's not my area of expertise, so I try to stay away from that. But and there's a personal aspect, I just like Terry, that is separate from, my relationship with him. And I did enjoy his books, but... All right. Let's see. All right, one more. There's one more. Dan, I got this from Dan. He writes, what I find most amazing about the furor surrounding the death of Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg is that the people who urged the president and the Senate to fulfill their constitutional roles when the Supreme Court Justice Anthony Scalia died are now saying that sitting president should not nominate Ginsburg's replacement. I think there are a few differences, and one is the 11-month versus 2, but basically I agree. My thought is that either you care about the Constitution or you don't. I agree completely. If you care about it, then you will quote it when it's convenient and advise against following it when it's not convenient. That's hypocrisy, yes. And he says, the people who flip-flopping on this issue are declaring that they want to cancel the Constitution. Yes, and I think both sides, at this point, I think both Republicans and Democrats want to cancel the Constitution. I think the Constitution is too binding on them. And to a large extent, they've already, let's be honest, they've already canceled the Constitution. I mean, think about all the executive orders. Think about, all the alphabet agencies. Think about all the things that are fundamentally, if you really understand the Constitution, are anti-constitutional, and everybody approves of it. To a large extent, the Constitution's already been canceled. Almost nobody takes the Constitution seriously. Almost nobody. All right, so we have a bunch of old Super Chat questions that I'm happy to do. Of course, if you want to ask a Super Chat question now, I will give it priority, particularly if it's over $20. Will Social Security and Medicare not exist in 40 years? Would you advise young people not to count on these programs whatsoever? I think that in 40 years, wow, at the rate civilization right now seems to be deteriorating, at the rate our standards are deteriorating, our institutions are deteriorating. I don't know what I can say about it in 40 years now. There could be a reversal and things could get better. But I think this is what I'd say about Social Security and Medicare. I'd say I wouldn't count on them. I'd say that even if they still exist, they will probably be mean tested. That is, poor people will get them, and if you're middle class and above, you won't. I think that their nature as basically redistribution of wealth will become from young to old, from irresponsible to responsible, from savers to consumers, to non-savers, it will become evident. And I think part of our job over the next 40 years is to make the case that Social Security and Medicare are two of the most immoral programs ever invented. They are massive redistributions of wealth. Again, from the irresponsible to the from the responsible to the irresponsible, from virtues to vices, from young to old. And it's horrific. It's just a horrific pyramid scheme. It's a horrific pyramid scheme. And it needs to be fought at every level, at every opportunity. And yes, if you're young, don't assume you're going to have it. Save. Because it might not be there, and you're still going to need to find a way, and you don't want to live on welfare. What do you think of Trump giving PR 13B? I don't know PR 13B. Oh, Puerto Rico $13 billion and trying to move drug manufacturing there from China. Drug manufacturing used to be there until the tax benefits were taken away from Puerto Rico. I'm not in favor of trying to move drug manufacturers anywhere. I'm not in favor of the government giving tax breaks to anybody. I'm not in favor of the government trying to manipulate businesses to do this or to do that. I'm in favor of getting rid of regulations. I'm in favor of flattening the tax rates and eliminating all deductions, all exclusions, all potential cronyism. I would like to see a flat tax with no deductions, no exclusions on a personal rate, and the same thing at a corporate level, if you even have. I truly believe in a zero corporate tax. So at a federal level, from a federal perspective, from a Trump perspective, no, I'm against trying to move manufacturing from here to there and from there to here. That is a disaster. Even if you believe that we don't want it all in China, well, let me tell you, there is not a single pharmaceutical company right now that is not discussing moving production away from China. They have learned their lesson that concentration is bad for them. So maybe they'll move it to Vietnam, or maybe they'll move it to Mexico, or maybe they'll move it to Nigeria, or maybe they'll move it, I don't know where. But the point is, it's not Trump's job or your job or anybody's job to tell them where to move it to. They will move it because they've realized the dangers of concentration. South Korea, right? It's another place they could move it to. So I think that's going to happen. But for the government to say it should be Puerto Rico, why? And when the hurricane comes and wipes out all the, and because Puerto Rico has said poor infrastructure and poor everything, that affects the quality of our drugs and the availability of it and the timeliness of it and the efficiency of it and the price of it. I mean, just lay off on these decisions. It's not the federal government's job to do it. And if you want to make Puerto Rico better, the solution to Puerto Rico is not to hand them $13 billion. Now, the $13 billion is really from 3 years ago from Hurricane Maria, and it's owed Puerto Rico, and only in the sense that that's what the federal government has promised, and that's what the federal government is set up to do, and it does it for every other state, so why not Puerto Rico? But the essential, what Puerto Rico needs is freedom. What Puerto Rico needs is the rule of law. What Puerto Rico needs is more FBI agents to root out corruption. What Puerto Rico needs is to do away with all the unbelievable regulations and controls and a nasty, horrific tax system for Puerto Ricans. I'm the beneficiary of a tax system for so-called immigrants into Puerto Rico, but if you're a Puerto Rican, you have a horrible tax system, very high, very complex, very, very, very bad. And the bureaucracy in Puerto Rico is bad. I mean, I could do a whole show on Puerto Rico and how to turn it into the Hong Kong of the Caribbean. I gave a talk on that. And it's not by giving them $13 billion and manipulating the pharmaceutical industry to shift some manufacturing over there. That is just to prolong the agony of Puerto Rico. Ashley asks, how do you consume news in two respects? What publications or authors do you regularly read? What process routines do you utilize? Do you set aside a particular block of time, or do you use news feed services? So I consume news all day. So basically, news consumption is what I do between what I do. Like in the blocks of time I have in between the other things that I do. So probably after the show, about an hour after the show, I'll start consuming news again, right? And it's just a constant. It just feeds in. Right? I don't consume really any news via television. I don't consider television news a legitimate source of anything other than emotionally satisfying propaganda if you already agree with their point of view. All the news I consume, and I don't consume it by radio either, all the news I consume, I used to consume some by NPR, but all the news I consume today as I consume in print, and I consume it online. So basically I use a number of tools. One is Google News. Google News is great. It just, you scan it, you see what the headline's in. Oh, Ruth Bader Ginsburg died. Okay, here's the first thoughts. Here's some generally what the mainstream media is writing about it. Great. Then if I want to dig deeper into a topic, then I'll start digging deeper into a topic. So I skim Google News, sometimes I skim Apple News, just to see what's hitting the headlines, just to see what they're talking about, just to see what seems to be relevant out there in the world. Then I generally will read, and sometimes more than others. I try to read stories out of the Wall Street Journal. I find the writing's good. It's not that they philosophically are any good. I often read The Atlantic, just because, again, I think they cover a wide array of issues. The articles are longer and they're very reflective of the mainstream media, but they present alternative views. So they do have alternative views of certain topics, but I find it really interesting. And then I go to some alternative media sources. I don't really read Reason Magazine. I dabble. I go to Cato when there's something interesting that I want to research. So Cato and Reason are more places that I go to when I want to dig deeper, but not at the beginning of a process. And only, it's certainly not for news. Neither Reason nor Cato is presenting news. They're presenting analysis, really. And for analysis, I don't really need them. What else? I read. I get a email feed from a number of sources. I get an email feed from Commentary Magazine, and I read Commentary Magazine periodically when there's an article that interests me. I find their articles interesting. I've been reading them since I was doing research on neoconservatives. I find neoconservatives interesting. I disagree with them, but it's interesting to see how they think about the world, and often we're in agreement. I get the Dispatch, which is Jonah Goldberg. So I get an email from Jonah Goldberg. I get an email from French. I forget his first name right now. So like the more old-line conservatives who are more inclined towards free markets. French is religious, quite religious. Goldberg is not. So kind of tilting on the right. I like to read them. There's also a few that are on the left. Persuasion is an email list that I'm on, which is always interesting. So I like the center left, center right, although I don't really think Jonah Goldberg and David French consider themselves center. They consider themselves right, but a different kind of right, a non-Trumpian right. So I like the sources I like the anti-Trump Republican sources. And I like the anti-crazy leftist sources, the Sam Harrises of the world, right? That kind of stuff, and that's what I do. And then if there's an issue I'm interested in, then I'll just do research, and that'll take me in all kinds of directions. I'll even go to some of the crazy websites on the right or on the left just to check them out, Vox or Slate or. Slate's not, Salon's a crazy one. Just to check out what people are thinking. And I'll do the same, National Review, and I don't like National Review, but I'll look at National Review. I'll look at some of the more pro-Trump stuff as well. Fox News, but only Fox if I read it. I won't watch anything on TV. I hate TV news. I hate the way they present themselves. I hate their pretentiousness, and they look down their nose at everybody from Tucker Carlson to Hannity to on the left, all of them at CNN. I mean, I just find them, ugh. I like Cavuto. I used to watch Cavuto. I've liked Vonnie on and on. So there are people, particularly on the financial news, that I like, but I can't stand television, so I just stay away from it. Television news. What are the negative scenarios in the direction the U.S. is going? Oh, I don't know. There are an infinite number of really negative ways in which things could go to hell. It's positives that there's limited opportunities. There are lots of negatives. But I believe that we're heading towards authoritarianism. I think the Chinese model will be our model. I can see a day where, let's say, the elections are minimal in the United States. It's like a Russian model. Putin is the president. There are elections, but they don't really matter. Putin's always going to be president if he wants to be. And I see the United States going down that road while maintaining a semi-free economic system so that they don't completely kill the golden goose. So I see kind of a right-wing authoritarianism, so kind of fascism, as the future of America, where the left is defeated, the socialism in America is defeated, and maybe even violently defeated. But what has remained is kind of a Chinese fascism, where the government controls, but for the most part has a soft touch when it comes to economics, but has a pretty harsh touch when it comes to politics and social issues. That's the path I think we go. And that could happen under a Democrat, it could happen under a Republican. Again, I don't think labels are what matter. I think it's ideas. And I've said, I think whoever has the ability to unite two things, I think will be successful. Something important to the left, to the authoritarian left, and something important to the authoritarian right. And my view is the combination that will actually win the day is environmentalism with religion, but that's just one combination. There could be many others, and then all the other elements within the left will be wiped out, and all the other elements within the right will be wiped out, and that'll be the combination that triumphs. Right? Hopefully, I'm wrong. I will be happy to do a show on how wrong I was. The Shadow Blade says, enjoying your shows, would not be here without you. That's great. Question, how do you deal with Marxist relativists? Well, I mean, it depends what you mean by deal with. I mean, I don't associate with people like that. I stay away from them. I only engage with anybody who's a Marxist or anybody who's a relativist if I'm going to debate them. And I only do that not for the purpose of convincing them, because I think certainly if they're beyond a certain age, they're beyond convincing. I do it professionally as public debate so that young people can see that there's an alternative to this, right? So it's so I guess it depends on what you mean by relatives. Well, I ignore them. So I have an uncle who I used to really love when I was little, who is an out and out Marxist, and I just if I see him, and I try not to see him too often, I don't talk about these issues. I ignore those issues. Just don't talk to them about politics, about anything you care about. If you have to associate with them, at some point you don't have to associate with them. I have a Marxist uncle, again, who I was close to when I was young, but I stopped talking about these issues with him because he would get angry and I would get angry, and what's the point? So I don't bring it up. It's not relevant to my relationship with my family. My relationship with my family is based on, common history, common family-oriented values. Anything outside of that. I don't talk about art with my parents. Their taste in art is crazy. It's completely wrong. It's really bad. And I have strong views about art, so I don't talk to them about art. So we just don't discuss that topic. I don't discuss epistemology with my mother, right? What's the point? right? She's more of a relativist. She's more of a multiculturalist. What value would I get from that? I'm not going to convince her. So you have to learn when to stop arguing with your family, when to stop. If some family member says something that you find offensive, say, I disagree. Turn around, walk away. Throw a hand grenade like that. But you don't have to engage. You don't have to get to a big fight. I have another uncle who I see when I'm in Israel, and because he comes to family dinners, and he always wants to argue with me about socialized medicine. And I just don't engage. I keep telling him, I don't want to do this. Why? We're having dinner. I just want to enjoy the food and enjoy the company. And I don't want to debate politics. Why is politics an essential feature of family life? It shouldn't be. Somebody says, speak when people are ready to listen. Yeah. I mean, it takes time to learn this, because certainly when I was young, I wasn't like this. I argued with everybody at every opportunity, at every invitation, everywhere. And I was obnoxious about it. But it's not a useful use of your time. Today, I am way too selfish to do that. Way too selfish to do that. So, it's that's my argument about philosophy, but about politics and about any issue that with art there's going to be major disagreement. Why do it? If your relationship is based on something else, then focus on that something else. And if it's impossible for you to have a relationship with your family, then don't have one. You don't owe your family a relationship. All right. We're gonna call it a day there. That's an hour and a half. We'll be back tomorrow. Tomorrow, I'm not sure exactly what time, but it will be around 1 or 2 o'clock, something like that, in the afternoon Pacific time, 1 or 2 o'clock Pacific time. So I will see you there. Thanks, Noel. I really appreciate that. Thank you for all the super chat. Thank you for all the support. Those of you who would rather support me on a monthly basis, you can do that at yaronbrookshow.com/support. You can do it on Patreon. You can do it on Subscribestar. We've got about 206 people watching live, 152 thumbs up. So I'd appreciate it if before you left, you put a like on the video. It helps the algorithm. It is really helpful for bringing the video up in the YouTube hierarchy and bringing this video to more new people. Also, don't forget to share. And if you don't subscribe, about 40% of people who watch the show over the last 2 months are not subscribers. So there's a big opportunity to become a subscriber. That would be terrific. We're really, really close. I think is it 22,000? So we're very close to 22,000 subscribers. I think we'd probably get there today if you guys cooperated. So please go to the web, go to YouTube, and subscribe to the Yaron Brook Show at youtube.com/Yaron Brook. We're not almost at 30. We're 22,000. So we've got 8,000 to go. And a lot more than that if we want to get to 100,000 soon. So, but yes, please support the show in any way that you can. I do 4 shows a week. It's a lot of work, and I put a lot of time and effort into this. And I appreciate all of you who show your support, whether verbally or through the $sign. Thanks, everybody. I will see you tomorrow. Bye, everybody.